All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final brown bag lunch of the fall semester. We're glad you could join us. And the topic for today's talk is, as you can see on the screen there, is going to be insights into the National Institutes of Health. And it's an area that we're excited to present today for a number of reasons. But I think as we go forward with our endeavor to get more external grants into the college, one of the avenues is through the NIH. So the format that we're going to pursue today is Erica Bentley is going to give us a overview of all things NIH related that you should know, particularly as a new investigator getting into this agency. And then we're delighted to have two panelists, Claire St. Peter from psychology and Lisa Holland from chemistry, who will be on hand to answer questions as seasoned NIH recipients of grants in the past and present. So without further ado, let me hand the baton over to Erica.
All right, great. Thanks, Duncan. Thanks everybody for being here, as always, on these virtual brown bags. I apologize that we don't have cookies to give you, but it is nice that you guys can join us from wherever you may. I am certainly no insider to the NIH, so most of the information I'm presenting, well, all the information is publicly available, but I know the NIH has a plethora of resources out there, and sometimes it's hard to figure out what's what and why things are called what they're called and how to find information. So I hope today this presentation will help you feel more comfortable navigating the NIH and applying for funding. So let's get started. Go over the NIH, what the organization looks like. We're going to talk about all these acronyms. You always hear R01s and RFAs and FOAs, and what are all these acronyms? We're going to talk about a lot of those. We're going to go through the review process. So both Lisa and Claire have both served and currently serve on NIH study sections. So we'll talk about what this is when the NIH is reviewing your application. And then we'll have like a Q&A with our panelists. So the NIH grant life cycle is similar to grant life cycles at other agencies. You plan your research, you find the right opportunity, you submit the application, they receive it, they make the awards, you manage the awards, you share your results. And from the planning to making the awards, I mean, it could take even 8 months from the time you submit the application until an award is made. So we always recommend that you start early, ask plenty of questions along the way, and think carefully about what you are going to do and how you're going to approach NIH for funding. The NIH is made up of 27 different institutes and centers. Each have a different research agenda. They often focus on a particular disease or a body system. So you want to know which one of these institutes or centers you're going to submit to. They have different processes. They have different priorities. So once you identify the center that you think is the best fit for your research, you might want to reach out to the program officer of the program in that institute or center. You could email them if you have a one-pager, a solid one-pager, or a draft specific aims page. Send it to them, ask if they have time to talk to you, whether this fit. You're going to spend a lot of time putting this application together. You don't want to waste your time and waste their time if you're not a good fit for their particular institute or center. Find well-respected mentors and collaborators to also read your application as you're preparing it. Our office is happy to help, but we certainly are not experts in all of your areas of expertise out there in the Eberly College and beyond. So find some good collaborators. I'm going to show you a tool later to help you identify maybe some collaborators outside of WVU that can help you with your application and maybe even serve as a consultant for you. Get other people to read your application. As Claire and Lisa will probably say, having the experience of being a reviewer, you get to see a lot of different things in an application that make them stronger or make them your colleagues you identify those things before you submit as well. And put your best ideas forward, because as we all know, funding is really competitive. This chart shows us the new research projects. So these are not resubmissions, these are not renewals, these are brand new research projects submitted to the NIH between 2010 and 2019. The bar in orange are the number of applications reviewed. And you can see on the left-hand side shows you the number. The gray are the number that are awarded. The yellow line shows you the success rate over there on the right. So less than % success rate for brand new research proposals to NIH. Okay, it's really competitive. You should still apply. Don't let this dissuade you from applying, but you've got to put your best foot forward. And it's going to be easier to do that if you understand what you're talking about when you're talking to a program officer or when you're talking to your colleagues and trying to figure out how to apply. So let's talk about some of our, Okay, I'm going to turn my video off because it looks like I'm having some issues. All right, hopefully that is a bit better. Can you hear me better, Story? Okay, great. All right, keep going. So at the NIH, we have many different types of research programs. We have research grants, we have career development awards, research training and fellowship awards, project and center grants, and there are all these different kinds of series. You'll hear people talk about the R series and the awards and the T's and the F's. What the heck do these mean, and when should you consider applying for them? This is a lovely slide I pulled from a recent presentation at the NIH Seminar of the different types of funding opportunities and when it is appropriate in your career trajectory to try to apply. We're going to focus today on the early research career and established investigator programs, those commonly used and applied for the R03, the R21, R15s, and R01s. Any questions so far before we move on? Feel free to put your questions in the chat at any point in time and we will get to them before we wrap up today. Our R03 small grant program, not ours, the NIH's, are there for small projects that can be carried out in a short period of time with limited resources. They provide funding for up to 2 years to support very different types of projects. Funding is usually about $50,000, no more, per year in direct costs. So $100,000 over 2 years. It's not a lot of money, it doesn't go very far. So these are for pilot or feasibility studies, collection of preliminary data, secondary analysis of existing data, small self-contained research projects, or the development of new technology. But again, think about the scale, up to $100,000 over 2 years. If that's appropriate for you, you should consider an R03. The R21 bigger, the direct cost, they cannot exceed $275,000 over a period. They are encouraging new and exploratory and developmental research projects. They're high risk, high reward that may lead in a breakthrough in a particular area. You do not have to have preliminary data for an R21, but if you do have it, you can include it. R15s, this is an opportunity that I think a lot of faculty overlook because they don't think we qualify. WVU as a whole does not qualify for the REAP program. That is the Research Enhancement Award Program for health professional schools and graduate schools. WVU does not qualify for those. We bring in more than $6 million, or we have over a 3-year period. We've averaged more than $6 million over a 3-year period. We do in the Eberly College qualify for the Academic Research Enhancement Award, area awards. These are 15s. So we can apply if you are a faculty member in the Eberly College and possibly some of the other colleges across WVU. The project periods are limited years. Your direct costs are generally up to $300,000 over that 3-year period. The difference between this and other research awards is they want to see a broader impact. They want you to provide students, particularly undergraduate students with research training, and they want to research increase and strengthen the research environment of the institutions that are applying. So don't look these R15. We hear from the NIH that once you have an R15, it's much easier to get a renewal. They're less competitive to continue on for your second round of R15 funding. So apply for these while you can. I hope that someday we aren't eligible because we're very successful, but for now we are still eligible. And then we have the big one, the R01, the big research project grant from the NIH. The awards are made to support discrete, specified, circumscribed project to be performed by that investigator in an area of their specific interest and competence. They can be initiated or they can be solicited through an RFA. The budgets are not limited, but they should reflect the actual costs of the work. If you're going to request more than 500,000 in direct costs for each year, you'll get prior approval for that. R01s are generally 1 to 4 years. You can get renewals, you can get no cost extensions. These are competitive. Also note that if you're an early stage investigator, that means if it's been 10 years or less since you have completed your terminal degree and you have not served as a PI on an NIH grant, you will be prioritized for funding if your proposal gets a meritorious score. Okay, so just because you're an early stage investigator doesn't mean you can't apply for one. If you've got a really great idea, great team, you might have an advantage over others. So how do you find the right fit? There are a lot of types of funding through the NIH. Sorry, I skipped ahead. I hear I'm still glitching. I apologize about that. We're going to try to look at the NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts. I'm going to pull it over on screen. Hopefully you guys can see it. Okay. So if you're looking for funding and you have a keyword, this is a great place to start. You're going to see a theme today in my search. We're just going to search for COVID. So what happens if you're looking for funding with COVID-19 related research? With that keyword, all of these different opportunities are going to pop up. So here you'll see different RFs, RFAs, different notices related to funding for COVID related research. This is a good place just to start looking. You can of course filter here on the left, but this is a really nice way just to get out there. Then there's also this wonderful tool NIH has created called the NIH Reporter. The NIH Reporter, you search in a variety of different ways, but this Matchmaker tab is particularly cool. You can take a draft of your specific aims or your abstract, paste it in here, run a search, and it will give you results of similar projects that have been funded and program officials for institutes that have funded projects similar to yours. So use this resource. It's great to help find collaborators. So if you're looking for somebody with expertise in a certain area, you can search by keyword, you can search by type of funding. There's all kinds of ways here in the NIH report. So if you have time, go take a look as you're preparing applications. It is a great resource. All right. Moving on. Questions? Can you still hear me? Excellent. Okay. So now, what are FOAs? FOAs are your funding opportunity announcements. There are a variety of types. We have parent announcements. You'll hear people say they're applying to the parent R01. It's a funding announcement that investigator-initiated applications can be submitted to. They have R21 parents, R01s, some are for clinical trials, some are not. So these generally are not updated as often as some others. So keep an eye out for those. Program announcements are formal statements about a new or ongoing extramural activity or program. Sometimes they continue from year to year with just changes based on administrative requirements. Most can be submitted to a standing submission and they're reviewed with other applications received at that time. They can be used for any support mechanism, so it could be an R01 or an R21, except for construction awards for program announcement. You may also see PARs. Those are PAs with special referral or review considerations, and PASs. They're PAs with set-aside funds, or that are funded through set-aside funds. Next, we request for proposals. Those are announcements when the NIH wants to make a contract or an award to meet a specific need, like the development of a specific animal model. They have a single application receipt date. R8 are requests for applications. They're soliciting a grant or cooperative agreement in a well-defined scientific area to accomplish specific goals. The RFA indicates the amount of money they have set aside, the number of awards, whether cost sharing is required, all of that information. And you can find all of that in the FOA announcement. And then there are these notice of special interest. We're seeing a lot more of these as time goes along. You'll see a lot of them on our COVID-19 funding site, because these notices of special interest for specific topics of interest. They usually direct you to apply to a parent RFA or another particular solicitation. So keep an eye out for the, expect to see more program announcements, less announcements, and more notice of special interests going forward. If you see something and you're confused about what to do, contact us. We can walk you through it and help you figure out if it's a thing for you to apply to. So what do you look for in FOA? I'm going to go through one very quickly with you all, because this is something I do with a lot of the graduate classes I'm asked to come and speak to, but I don't know that other people get an opportunity to have someone walk them through an FOA. So I know we don't have a ton of time, but we're going to go through one pretty quickly here. I typed in COVID again to see what comes up. Obviously, there's a lot. You can see the activity code, all of these different funding types over here. Let's look at this one. Okay, so this is a funding opportunity announcement. You can see that it's a PAR based on the number. Obviously, our title. One of the most important things to look for when you're thinking about to an FOA is the participating organizations. This particular opportunity, the National Institutes on Aging is the only participating institute. So if you're looking to do a mental health or on addiction and you want it to go to, say, NIDA, this is not the opportunity for you, okay? So you're gonna wanna make sure your participating organization is included in this list. Very, very important. This will also tell you if clinical trials are required, optional, or not allowed, okay? So that will be included in your funding opportunity title. This companion funding opportunity line is also really helpful. If you're not ready to do an R01 and there's an R21 for the same subject, it's going to be here under the companion funding opportunities. Helpful. And of course, you need to read every word of the FOA. I'm just highlighting the most important things and where you can find them. But read every word of every lines on every grant you write. You're going to see key dates. So that includes your deadline dates, some standing rolling deadlines, others have specific deadlines. You're going to see when the review is going to happen. You'll find out the council review dates. And this one doesn't have a date. It's interesting. They're all very different. Your earliest start date, very important when planning for when you're going to grad students and when the project's going to start and when you're going to recruit. Make sure that's in line with when you can start the project. And the expiration date here. You want to start working on an application that's going to expire in the next 3 or 4 months, because that means you're going to have to start all over with a brand new package when the new one is announced. If there is a new one, it may go away. So all those dates are very, very important. Of course, the funding opportunity description, extremely important. Read it when you're writing your first draft, read it when you have a second draft, share it with anybody who's going to read your application. You want to make sure you are addressing the agency's needs, and this is where you're going to find that information. Award information, this is going to tell you how many applications they expect to make, what the budget will be. This one, the budgets are not limited, but need to reflect the actual needs of the project. So again, 500,000 is the max year indirect cost for R01s. If it's big, if the max is higher, they'll put that here in this section. If this is only for new applications, you'll see this. So again, pay attention, make sure what you're proposing matches the scope of the particular FOA. Eligibility information, important. Generally, WVU is eligible. If not, you will not see nonprofits, and you will not see public or state-controlled institutions of education. There's the categories we can apply for WVU. Very rarely are we not eligible. Down here is perhaps, from where I sit, the section that gets the most attention. Our application and submission instructions. All applications must follow the instructions in the SF424 R&R application. If the solicitation requires additional information, you're going to find that in this section. So for example, in particular application, this FOA, it's just the standard guidelines. But you'll see for the research plan, you have to follow the guidelines with these additional instructions. You're going to want to make sure that you address everything else listed here under the application instructions. Same thing for your human subjects clinical trial information, all of that, the requirements, in addition to what's in that lovely hundreds of pages long SF424 guide we know and love. You really want to pay attention to this information. Be rejected without reviews, you didn't address something. And then last, but certainly not least, application review information. This is going to show you what they're looking for in this particular solicitation and the general review criteria. If there's something specific, it's going to be mentioned here. So read this multiple times, make sure you understand what it is they're looking for. And lastly, in an FOA, I mean, of course, there's other information about after an award is made and all that kind of stuff, but down here, agency contacts. So if you're looking for talk to in the scientific side, the scientific research contacts are good, as well as the grant management people. Okay, so is a quick overview of an FOA. Any other questions? Okay, so what are you going to be scored on? Significance, the quality of the investigators, and the quality of the research environment. Every NIH application is going to be scored on these things. There's additional criteria if you are dealing with human subjects, vertebrate animals, biohazards. If this is a resubmission or renewal, they're also going to be looking at how you have been successful in your previously funded projects and how you have addressed the reviewer's critique. Clinical trials are also going to be on your study timeline. Again, you can find all of this information and details about this information in the FOA. So the NIH review process, you've put together your application, you're ready to submit. So as you all know, you don't submit, the college, the office-sponsored program submits for you. It goes to the NIH. At that point, their Center for Scientific Review, Division of Receipt and Referral, they process the application, screen it. So they're going to screen it for all of these things that my office is harping on you about, the right forms, being in the margins, using the right fonts, making sure all the attachments are there. It's going to do an automated screen of your application to make sure it is in compliance. Then it goes to the Center for Scientific Review. They assign the application to a study section. The study section reviews it for scientific merit. Then it goes to the institute, who looks at it for program relevance. Then it goes on to the advisory council that makes recommendations for funding to the institute or center director. That institute or center director is the one that makes the final funding decision based on the advisory council's advice. So it's quite a process. You can see why it takes a long time. I'm going to go through these quickly. We're running short on time. Our scientific review groups are also called study sections. So again, the NIH uses all this terminology. You may not have understood that the two are the same. They are. They have types of SRGs. There's an integrated review group that are clusters of study sections based on a particular discipline. They're assigned to the IRG and then they go to the study section. Chartered study sections that review most investigator-initiated applications. These may have regular members or just temporary members on that section. There are also special emphasis panels. I think Claire is on one of these. They review applications on special topics, and if there's somebody who has applied who's a member of a study section, then they have to convene a special study section to review that application. Luckily with the NIH, you can find the members of many of the study sections at this link here. You can search by institute or center and get the list of the people currently serving. Your reviewers are assigned scientific review officer. They figure out who the best people are to evaluate it based on their slate of reviewers. The reviewers have access to your application about 6 weeks before the study section meeting. The application goes to 3 or more reviewers, and at least 2 of them provide full written critiques. These assigned reviewers lead the discussion at the meeting. Before the review committee meets, the reviewers confidentially submit preliminary critiques. The reviewers also assign preliminary scores for each of the review criterion we just talked about, and for the overall impact of the application. The scientific review officer then uses that preliminary overall impact score to get the list of applications to be discussed. Applications in the lower half generally are not discussed. And then the review order for those applications that are discussed are random. When the meeting is convened, they meet for 1 to 2 days. I'm pretty sure right now they're meeting remotely as we are. One member serves as the chair and conducts the meeting. The SRO is there. The assigned reviewers present the evaluations and any mailed in reviews are read. After they do this discussion, the reviewers meet privately and submit the overall impact scores to the Center for Scientific Review. Relevant NIH program staff are encouraged to attend, but they're not allowed to contribute to the discussion of the scientific merit of the application. There's a great video that I wish we had time to show right here of a mock study section. If you have time and you're interested in the process, I highly recommend watching this video. It'll give you more context of the kind of discussions that happen during study sections. NIH scoring, how the heck does that work? You would think a 9 would be a better score than a 1, but it's not. Your highest impact applications are going to get a lower score. So a high impact is a 1 through 4, low impacts are 8s and 9s. So each of those different criterion we've talked about will get a score, plus you will have an overall impact score. Then there are the percentiles and pay lines. We don't have time to explain how they come up with the percentile score. Google it and you can learn about it on your own, but they ranking of the applications based on the scores. Some of the institution centers, but not all, publish the percentile that makes an application fundable ahead of time, but not all. These are called pay lines. So you may have people talk about, oh, my application scored the 35th percentile and the pay line is 32. Do you think I'm going to get funded? Look at each of the institution centers. They have guidance out there about the pay lines that they currently have for the programs. Sometimes fund changes these and it impacts it as well. There's a continuing resolution. They can't promise, right? But go out and see, find once the results are released to you. So after the meeting, you'll get that score and the percentile ranking in ERA Commons. Within a month, you should have the summary statement, again, in the ERA Common. It has critiques provided by the reviewers, the summary of the discussion, scores for all your criteria, and notes of special information. If the application wasn't discussed, you will still receive reviewer critiques and preliminary scores for each of the criteria. Then the institute or center takes over. After that point, your program officer is in contact at the institution. They may help you interpret your results and help you decide if you should prepare a resubmission or submit to a different institute. They're going to be the next person to talk to. They will most likely email you. You'll get an automated email requesting just-in-time information. I recommend waiting. Every institute and center is different, of course. but you may want to wait until you get the official email from the program officer. You want to spend a lot of time preparing the just-in-time documents if they really aren't going to consider you for funding. So the program officer will contact you if you are in the pay line and they're considering your project for funding. And you can always contact us if you get an email and if you have questions. We get those all the time. So serving on a peer review committee is a great idea. You're going to get to see the process. You'll get to see good and bad proposals. You'll be exposed to new ideas. You'll make some new connections, meet new people. We highly recommend that you try to serve on a study section at the NIH if you are going to seek NIH funding. Here's a link that will take you to resources to teach you how to apply and how to become a peer reviewer. So I think I've talked enough. I'd like to bring Dr. Holland and Dr. St. Peter back with us and take questions from everybody in the audience, and hopefully you guys can tell us about your experience. Can you start with an introduction of yourself, your research area, and tell us which review panels you've sat on? Start with you, Lisa, as you're higher on than Claire is.
Hi, I'm Lisa Holland. I'm in the Department of Chemistry. I have been at WVU for 18 years. My area of specialty is bioanalytical chemistry. So I invent new methodology and techniques to solve or answer questions that are currently unanswerable with the instrumentation available. I am a standing member on the NIH study section on instrumentation systems development. So that involves creating new approaches or new instruments to solve unanswered questions. I think that covers what you needed for my intro.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm Claire St. Peter. I'm a professor in the psychology department. I've been at WVU since 2006. And my main area of interest is in behavioral psychology with a special emphasis on childhood behavior problems. And so I'm particularly interested in developing solid assessments and interventions to support children who are struggling with challenging behavior. I haven't served on any standing NIH study sections, but got involved with HRSA in 2014. And then I've had some unusual experiences in that I've served on a couple of the special emphasis panels that Erica mentioned earlier, a special member conflict panel. So that's the panel that Erica mentioned when you have members of the standing study section who submit a grant. And then have been a temporary member on standing study sections where they needed particular expertise in my area that wasn't already represented on that study section.
Great, thank you both. Anybody who has questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to them. But first, we'll go back to you, Claire. Can you tell us what you've learned from being on a review panel?
It's really interesting. I'm in the process right now of resubmitting a grant, which Erica is all too aware of at the moment because we're right to crunch time on it, and was talking with some of my graduate students about the feedback that we had received. And as we were walking through the feedback from the last round of review, one of my very senior doc students said, Claire, it seems like you're reading between the lines a lot here. Like, how is it, like, how do you know that they mean this when they say that? And my best answer to that was, I've sat on this study section multiple times now, so I have a better sense of when they phrase something in a particular way, what that was reflective of in the actual discussion. And then I also got a much better sense of how people, I work in a very broad area, so childhood behavior problems, there's lots of theoretical approaches to that. And so I also got a better sense of how people were framing things that could be better consumed by study section panelists who were coming from lots of different theoretical perspectives. And I think that's probably been the most important or most useful aspect for me.
Great. Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that sounds right on cue. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we can definitely elaborate on for sure, but maybe I would just want to focus on question areas where people have specific thoughts.
So we have a question for Lisa and Claire. It says, can you talk about the importance of the specific aims from the perspective of the reviewer and share your tips about effective specific aims?
Either me or Claire, it's fine. I don't know, Claire, do you have a preference? Okay. So from me, from my perspective, and this comes from two things, the university, and I don't know if you still are, and Duncan, you can chime in, or Erica, used to offer a class called Right-Winning Grants, and I participated in that class probably 4 times. And I learned a lot from them about the specifics aims page, which other people will call the executive summary. And that's basically how to effectively get your point across so that people will understand where to frame you. When you start with a proposal, and this is all information online, a proposal starts at a 5, and that means it's in the middle, and you have to decide if it's gonna go up or down, and understanding what's the significance, innovation, the merit in the proposal up front is very helpful. I also do teach proposal writing in almost all of my graduate classes. And this is something that I learned from the Right-Winning Grants proposal classes that the university had offered, is that you really don't get a good perspective on that until you put yourself in the position of being a reviewer, which is you have a full-time day job, you probably have 50 things you already have to do, and now you have to read through either 6 or 12 pages of a proposal, depending on what the grant mechanism is. So when I do this with my students in my grad classes, I will give them proposals they have written right before Thanksgiving break and ask them to finish the review before Thanksgiving, because that really puts it in the context of what the reviewer is doing, and that's balancing their daytime job and their work-life balance with their reviews. So what they really don't want is some elaborate Shakespearean prose to make you get to the very end of the page to find out who done it. What they really want is to know exactly what you're doing as concisely and precisely as you can say. And they really don't want to know every detail. They just want to know the ones that make it important and striking to pursue. And as obvious as that is to say, my students in my graduate class never understand that until it's 2 in the morning on the Tuesday of their Thanksgiving break, and they're really irritated because you make them work for figuring out why this project is innovative and framing it in the context of what's currently available and why this is needed. And when it happens, the epiphany occurs. And so I would say, even if you can't review for NIH, it's important to try to review as much as you can.
And I'll add to that I think, as Erica mentioned, your full project is only going to be read by a couple of people. And what a lot of other reviewers are going to do who are sitting in on that discussion is they'll pull up your project in the course of the meeting, and largely what they're going to read or skim or look for is your specific aims page. So that one page, the clarity, as Lisa said, of that one page becomes really important, because as other reviewers are trying to understand what the discussion is about, they're often looking just at that one page, and they don't necessarily have, or they have access to, but they are not going to have time to read or skim the rest of your document, which makes that one page pretty important in the overall understanding, I think, of the broader panel.
All right, we
Great.
have another question from Katie Morrison. What role do you think communication with program officers prior to submission plays in success?
I can talk about an epic fail here. So when I first started writing NIH grants, I do not like talking to new people. It is not my thing. I don't enjoy it. I thought that I'm going to write a good proposal and I'm going to put it in, and I'm not going to talk to the program officer because it's going to be a good proposal and my work is great. And the program office, like program officer official at NIH, when it got to the screening process, actually sent me an email and said, "Are you sure that you want this to go through? Because this doesn't really match anything that we're looking to fund right now." And I was so embarrassed. So I do think that some of that upfront communication, unless you're pretty familiar with what is going to play well with that institute, is probably pretty important. Or at least might save you some embarrassment.
I think that's well stated. I have nothing to add what Claire has said.
I will add that you do not want to ask a program officer a question that can be answered by reviewing the guidelines. Always read your guidelines first. That would be the full SF424. Ask our office if it's a technical question. Read your FOA. Do not reach out to a program officer for a question that can be answered by doing your homework. As Claire says, it's in the syllabus. I love it. Have either of you changed the way that you present your information because of an experience you've had on a review panel? Lisa, call on you.
So technically, I'm not allowed to discuss anything that's occurred in a review panel. And so I answer all my questions based on the mock panel review and all the publicly available information. And I do recommend watching that video. And honestly, I would have to say, the value in being a reviewer is having that epiphany moment about how your reviewers are your advocates, and you need to give them as much weaponry or resources to argue for you as possible. So you need to make it easy for them to state their cases. How does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Anything to add, Claire?
Really just the echo of what I said before, which is, when you're working in an area that could have lots of different theoretical interpretations, it is valuable to know how people from different perspectives are going to read your work. And so I think one way to get that is by serving on a review panel, but short of serving on a review panel, just making sure that you're not putting yourself in an echo chamber where the only people that you're talking to are people who are already familiar kind of with your approach or with your discipline, because your study section is likely to be pretty diverse.
We have another question. It says, unlike NSF, there doesn't seem to be as much of an emphasis on broader impacts for NIH. Is this true? Do you incorporate outreach in your proposals?
So I think this is an interesting question. I'm interested in Lisa's perspective because our areas are just so very different, right? So I am in a more social science outreach kind of discipline. And my most recent grant that I submitted to NIH, one of the criticisms of that grant was that the therapeutic approach that we were discussing in that grant of evaluating might not be broadly available. And so one of the things that the reviewers said as a concern was that I hadn't fully addressed kind of outreach and availability. And if this is effective, how do you get it into the hands of people? But my thought on that is that it might be kind of specific to the area. So I'm interested in Lisa's experience.
So I have two perspectives, and the first is there are several grant announcements where it is spelled out that you need to have an outreach component or a broader impacts component. they're not the unsolicited components, but there are a few. And it also depends sometimes on the agency, because some agencies have very specific announcements. So typically in instrument development, the answer is not so much. But I will say, and this is not something related to a review experience, but broad applicability is important, which means in our fields, like in micro scale separations, there's a big joke that you create this incredible technology, which we call lab on a chip, which is you miniaturize everything so you can walk around and do portable measurements in outer space or in rural America, things like that. But sometimes lab on a chip becomes chip in a lab because only a few people can do it. So if you don't have a pathway for something to be universal, or to leave your lab, that can be a problem. And that's a little bit, I think, parallel to what you're saying, Claire, but in a different sense.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. We definitely see a difference. There's way more emphasis on broader impacts for NSF than NIH. But again, it depends on that solicitation. You've got to read your FOA and understand what the agency wants out of the research. Any other questions from the audience?
We have one more that just came in. In your experience, how are multi-PI versus single PI grants received by study section? I'm especially interested as a new PI and strategizing solo submissions versus collaborations.
So what I can say is I have never had, I have no experience or comments on multi-PI submissions, and maybe Claire does. But to me, that's something I would definitely call the program manager. And at one point, and please forgive me if you've already submitted it, but I know ECAS had sent out template email forms so you could change it up. And it was basically, how do you communicate with a program officer? And it organized what you should state first and things like that. And you just filled in what you were doing. I mean, I think I would want to do something like that and contact the person that way and set up a time and just ask them.
I think being able to demonstrate that you will be able to manage the money successfully and get to a product where you're going to be able to answer your question is useful. Now, that multi-PI is not necessarily the way to do that. So I don't know that it really answers your question. But I think sometimes it seems like having more senior people who are involved in the grant in some way, if you're junior, might be helpful. That could be multi-PI, it could be having a co-I, it could be having an expert panel. And again, a lot of that depends on the funding opportunity and what they're looking for within that particular opportunity.
Great, and we have another question. Can you talk about the line between how much data you already need when applying and how much work you need to leave for the NIH funded project?
So I can start, but actually I do want to say one thing. I might have misunderstood Katie's question, listening to Claire. So you can be a PI and a co-I and a key personnel, but I know there is a mechanism where you can have two people come together. So you are each a PI on a proposal that's linked. And that's the one I have no idea on that one. But into what Claire said, she's 100% right. If you have a proposal which is interdisciplinary, and often that's what you need to do to be competitive. And so if I needed to bring somebody in from the med school or psychology, then the strength of their interaction would be reflected in how they're named on the proposal. So if they're a co-I, it means their involvement is pretty important. And if they're senior personnel, it means maybe they're only involved in a sub-aim or something. And if it's just a letter of support, it means that they even have less of an interaction. So if Katie, if that's what your question is, then in that sense, it depends on the level of engagement to be required for success. So if that person got mad at you and walked away, would you be completely unable to do the work? Is kind of the question. But the second question was about here, how much data do you show? And to me, the answer is that you need to show the amount of data that you need to convince the reviewers that you can do what you've said you're going to do. But you definitely don't want to show that you have all the data that you say you're going to do. So there's no point in funding you to do it already. And that can be a tough line, and that can be especially tough if you do an R21 because they don't require any data, but if they don't believe you or that your premise is possible, it can certainly be frustrating. And of course, on the other hand, if you have a ton of data in an R21, it's not really high risk anymore because you've basically done everything you have to do. So that's a really good point. You have to figure out that balance for sure.
Great, thank you very much. Anything else to add, Claire?
Not really. I think that was a great answer. You know, it's probably going to depend a little bit on which R mechanism you're going for, right? Like, and I think Lisa's right. My experience has been that too, that the R21 is probably the trickiest. With an R01, you definitely want to be able to demonstrate that you have something that you've done that can support the project. So you definitely want to have some kind of work that's in there. And for an R03, you know, that's not, R3s are designed to be pilot and feasibility studies. So it's kind of where you're getting those data, presumably, that are going into the larger projects.
Great. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. Anything else you guys want to share about your experiences? Any other questions from anyone? All right. Go ahead, Claire.
I just wanted to take a second to echo what you had said earlier, Erica, and something that Lisa said and put them together. So Erica, what you had said was be a reviewer if you can. And I want to encourage people to do that. You do learn a ton, both about the process and how to frame things in ways that are more versus less readable. But also linking to what Lisa said, which is that part of what you learn about is how important clear writing is, because the process, being a reviewer, does take a lot of time. So if you choose to do that, if you choose to serve on a study section, also give yourself a little bit of grace and clear as much off your schedule as you can. Because at least for me, the first couple of times that I did this, it took a large amount of time to figure out what I was looking for and how to navigate the process. It got easier as I continued to serve on study sections. I think because you do learn so much from engaging with the funding agency in this way. But so do it, but dedicate some time to be able to do it well, right? Because you want to get the most out of it for yourself, and you want to be a good reviewer for the agency so that they tag you again in the future.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I've certainly learned some things. Story just shared the link to our video resources page in the chat. You can find videos of the other 2 brown bag sessions we did earlier this fall there, and we will be adding this one to that resource bank. So if you have colleagues who weren't able to attend and you think the information would be valuable, please share the link with them. I'll also put the slides in a PDF with all the information if you want to share it with others. I apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning, but hey, that's the world we live in right now, right? So thanks for bearing with me. We also have a survey that Story put into the chat. Please take a few minutes and complete that. Let us know what you liked, and if you have ideas for future brown bag sessions, please, please, please let us know. There will be resources in the PDF. I should have shared those as well for further review. And of course, the sources, because I didn't make all this up. So thank you guys. Duncan, Leah, Story, anyone have anything else to add?
No, just thank you to you, Erica, for putting the presentation together and setting the stage so nicely. It's really appreciated.
Great.
Thank you, Lisa and Claire.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.